The Colmar Pocket, France. January 26, 1945. The temperature was below zero, and snow covered everything. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy's rifle company had been reduced to just 40 men after weeks of brutal combat against German forces desperately defending their last foothold in France. They were exhausted, under-equipped, and about to face the fight of their lives. Murphy, at 19 years old, was already a decorated veteran with a reputation for fearlessness that bordered on recklessness. He had enlisted at 16 by lying about his age, determined to fight after being rejected by every other branch of service for being too small. He was 5 feet 5 inches and weighed barely 110 pounds. But what he lacked in size, he made up for in lethality. The company had been ordered to hold a position near the village of Holzwehr while American forces prepared a major offensive. Intelligence reported German forces in the area, but the numbers were vague. Murphy's 40 men dug in along a tree line, preparing defensive positions in the frozen ground. Then, at dawn, the scouts returned with terrifying news. Approximately 300 German infantry, supported by 6 panzer tanks, were advancing directly toward their position. The odds were 7-1. Murphy's commanding officer immediately radioed for permission to withdraw. But headquarters ordered them to hold the position. The offensive depended on this ground being secured. Retreat was not an option. Murphy watched through binoculars as the German force assembled in the distance. 6 Mark IV tanks formed the center, with German infantry spread in skirmish lines on both flanks. They were preparing a coordinated assault that would overwhelm the tiny American force in minutes. Murphy had to make a decision. His 40 men couldn't stop 300 Germans and 6 tanks in a conventional defense. They needed something unexpected. Most soldiers in combat fire rapidly, spraying bullets in the general direction of the enemy. This suppresses enemy movement and creates psychological pressure. It's standard infantry tactics. Audie Murphy didn't fight like most soldiers. He fought like a hunter. Murphy had grown up in rural Texas during the Great Depression, hunting small game to feed his family. By age 10, he could shoot a rabbit at 100 yards with an old rifle. He learned patience, precision, and the importance of making every shot count. Ammunition was expensive and his family was starving. Those skills translated perfectly to combat, where ammunition was limited and every missed shot was a wasted opportunity. Murphy's method was simple but devastatingly effective. 1 shot, 1 kill. He didn't fire on automatic. He didn't spray bullets hoping to hit something. He took aimed, deliberate shots at individual targets. Most critically, Murphy targeted leaders and threats in priority order. Officers first to disrupt command, then machine gunners to eliminate suppressive fire, then radio operators to break communications, then tank commanders when they exposed themselves. This wasn't random shooting. It was systematic elimination of the enemy's combat effectiveness. As the German force began their assault, Murphy positioned himself on a disabled American M10 tank destroyer that had been knocked out days earlier but remained in position at the edge of the tree line. The M10 had a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top, still functional despite the vehicle being immobilized. Murphy climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, knowing it made him completely exposed but gave him the perfect field of fire. His men thought he was crazy. The M10 could explode at any moment. German fire would concentrate on such an obvious target. But Murphy understood that winning this fight required taking risks that others wouldn't. As German infantry advanced across the snow-covered field, Murphy let them come. He didn't fire when they were at maximum range. He waited until they were 200 yards away, close enough for guaranteed kills but far enough that German small arms fire would be inaccurate. Then he began. The first target was a German officer directing troops from the center of the formation. Murphy fired a 3-round burst from the .50 caliber machine gun. The officer dropped instantly. German infantry hesitated, confused about where the fire was coming from. Murphy had already selected his second target, an NCO trying to rally the men. Another burst. Another kill. Within the first 5 minutes, Murphy had killed 4 German officers and squad leaders. The German assault lost cohesion as junior soldiers looked around for someone to give orders. But Murphy wasn't done. He shifted his fire to the flanks where German machine gun teams were setting up to provide suppressive fire. Machine gunners are critical in infantry assaults. They pin down defenders while riflemen advance. Murphy systematically eliminated the machine gun teams. The German gunner would barely get set up before Murphy's bullets tore through him. The assistant gunner would try to take over. Murphy killed him too. In 15 minutes, Murphy had destroyed 3 German machine gun positions. The German infantry now advanced without covering fire, making them easy targets for the 40 American riflemen in the treeline. But the tanks were still coming. 6 Mark IV Panzers rumbled forward, their 75mm guns trained on the American positions. Murphy knew that if those tanks reached effective range, they would devastate his men. He needed to stop them or at least slow them down. A .50 caliber machine gun cannot penetrate the armor of a Mark IV Panzer tank. Murphy knew this, but he also knew that tanks are only effective when commanders can see and coordinate. And tank commanders have to expose themselves to do that. German tank doctrine required commanders to fight with their heads out of the turret hatch for better visibility. This made them vulnerable. Murphy waited until the lead panzer was 150 yards away, close enough to see the commander's head and shoulders exposed above the turret. He fired. The commander slumped. The tank lurched to a stop, now commanded by someone inside who couldn't see properly. Murphy repeated this with the second tank. The commander ducked down after seeing his colleague killed, but eventually had to look out to direct the tank's movement. The moment his head appeared, Murphy fired. Now 2 tanks were without commanders, buttoned up tight with limited visibility, essentially blind. The other 4 tanks slowed their advance, commanders ducking down. This was exactly what Murphy wanted. Tanks moving cautiously, unable to coordinate effectively. But German infantry continued advancing, using the tanks as cover. Murphy shifted his fire back to the infantry, targeting anyone who appeared to be leading or coordinating. By the second hour, Murphy had killed 11 Germans. His ammunition was running low. The M10 he was standing on was hit repeatedly by German fire. Bullets clanged off the armor. The vehicle was still smoking from the earlier damage, and Murphy was standing on what could become his funeral pyre at any moment. His men shouted for him to get down, to take cover. Murphy ignored them. He had a clear field of fire from this position, and giving it up would mean losing the fight. By the third hour, the situation had deteriorated catastrophically. German forces had advanced close enough that the 40 American riflemen in the treeline were taking heavy casualties. Several men were wounded. Ammunition was critically low. The M10 tank destroyer Murphy was standing on had been hit by a German tank round. The impact shook the entire vehicle and started a fire in the engine compartment. Smoke poured from the hull. His men screamed at him to abandon the position before the vehicle exploded. Murphy refused. From his elevated position on the M10, he could see the entire battlefield. He could see German infantry trying to flank the American positions. He could see tank commanders coordinating their next push. He could see NCOs rallying troops for another assault. If he left this position, the Germans would overrun his men in minutes. So Murphy stayed on the burning tank, knowing it could explode beneath him at any moment, and continued firing. By now, German forces had identified Murphy's position as the primary threat. Machine gun fire concentrated on the M10. Bullets struck all around him. The armor deflected most, but some ricocheted dangerously close. Murphy felt one bullet tear through his leg, a painful but non-critical wound. He ignored it and kept firing. His method remained unchanged. Identify the highest value target, aim carefully, fire precisely. Officers, NCOs, machine gunners, radio operators, anyone whose death would disrupt German coordination. The psychological effect on German infantry was devastating. Their leaders kept dying. Advances would begin and then falter as the soldier giving orders collapsed. German troops began going to ground, refusing to advance because standing up meant death. By the fourth hour, Murphy had killed 17 Germans. But the mathematics were brutal. Even with his systematic elimination of German leadership, 300 German infantry would eventually overwhelm 40 Americans through sheer numbers. Murphy understood this. His goal wasn't to kill all 300 Germans. That was impossible. His goal was to delay them long enough for American reinforcements to arrive. Every minute the German assault was stalled was another minute for help to get closer. So Murphy focused on maximizing delay. He targeted Germans who showed initiative, who tried to lead advances, who attempted to coordinate movements. He created a leadership vacuum where German junior soldiers were terrified to stand out because standing out meant becoming Murphy's next target. The German commander, a captain directing the assault from a position 300 yards back, realized what Murphy was doing and changed tactics. Instead of coordinated assaults, he ordered mass charges. If the Americans could only kill one German at a time, overwhelming them with numbers would work. At 1,400 hours, approximately 100 German infantry charged simultaneously across the open ground toward the American positions. Murphy's .50 caliber machine gun could fire 450 to 550 rounds per minute. Against a mass charge, he could kill multiple Germans per burst. He fired continuously, sweeping the gun across the charging infantry. Germans fell by the dozen, but they kept coming. Murphy's ammunition belt ran dry. He grabbed another belt, loaded it, and continued firing. The barrel of the machine gun was glowing red-hot from continuous fire. Steam rose where snow melted on the hot metal. His hands were burned from touching the weapon, but he couldn't stop. If he stopped firing, the charge would succeed. The mass charge broke against Murphy's fire like a wave against a cliff. Of the 100 Germans who charged, fewer than 30 reached the American treeline. Those who did were met with rifle fire from Murphy's 40 men and were killed or driven back. The charge had failed, but it had cost the Americans dearly. Ammunition was nearly exhausted. Several men were dead. More were wounded. Murphy's .50 caliber machine gun had fewer than 200 rounds remaining. The M10 he was standing on was fully engulfed in flames now. Smoke poured from every opening. The heat was intense. Murphy's uniform was singed. His face was blackened with soot. His leg wound was bleeding steadily. Any sane person would have abandoned the position. Murphy stayed. The German commander ordered artillery fire on the American positions. Shells began falling in the treeline where Murphy's men were dug in. The Americans took more casualties. Murphy could see his men dying but couldn't help them. If he left his position to render aid, the German infantry would advance and kill everyone. So he stayed on the burning tank and kept firing. By the 5th hour, Murphy had killed 21 Germans. His ammunition was almost gone. The M10 was going to explode. It was no longer a question of if, but when. His men were calling on the radio for him to fall back. Reinforcements were still 20 minutes away. Could he hold for 20 more minutes? Then a German sniper's bullet hit the M10 inches from Murphy's head. The round ricocheted off the armor and fragments cut Murphy's face. Blood poured into his eyes. He couldn't see clearly, but he could hear. He could hear German voices coordinating another assault. He wiped blood from his eyes and kept firing. At 1,530 hours, 6 hours after the battle began, Murphy fired his last rounds. The .50 caliber machine gun clicked empty. No more ammunition. The M10 beneath him was completely engulfed in fire. The heat was unbearable. Smoke inhalation was making him dizzy. His leg wound had soaked his pants with blood. He had reached the end. But so had the Germans. Murphy looked across the field and saw approximately 200 German infantry, 100 fewer than had started the assault. Among them, 23 lay dead from Murphy's personal marksmanship. Dozens more had been killed by his men in the treeline. The German assault had stalled. German troops were exhausted, demoralized, and leaderless. Every officer and NCO who had shown initiative was dead. When the battlefield was secured, American forces surveyed the carnage. 23 German bodies lay in a rough semicircle around the destroyed M10 tank destroyer, all killed by Murphy. Dozens more Germans had been killed by his men, but Murphy's personal tally was confirmed by witnesses and later by German survivors who were captured. Murphy was evacuated for medical treatment. His leg wound required surgery. He had severe burns on his hands. He had a concussion from the M10 explosion. He had fragments of metal embedded in his face. But he survived. For his actions on January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. The citation read in part, Second Lieutenant Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to a prepared position in a woods while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. His crew withdrew to the woods. Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. Murphy's method, calm, precise, individual target engagement, had proven more effective than the standard spray-and-pray approach. He had demonstrated that, in some situations, quality of fire matters more than quantity. Audie Murphy's actions on January 26, 1945, became a case study in military academies for decades. What made his method so effective? First, target prioritization. Murphy didn't shoot randomly. He systematically eliminated the enemy's leadership and critical assets: officers, NCOs, machine gunners, radio operators. This disrupted German coordination and turned an organized assault into a mob. Second, precision over volume. While his fellow soldiers fired rapidly with low accuracy, Murphy took aim shots with high accuracy. His hit rate was estimated at over 70%, extraordinary in combat conditions. This meant his ammunition lasted longer and every round had maximum effect. Third, psychological warfare. By consistently killing anyone who showed leadership, Murphy created a psychological environment where German soldiers were terrified to stand out. This paralyzed initiative and made the German force less effective than its numbers suggested. Fourth, strategic positioning. By taking the exposed position on the M10, Murphy accepted personal risk to gain tactical advantage. The elevated position gave him superior fields of fire and visibility. Most soldiers prioritize personal survival over tactical effectiveness. Murphy did the opposite. Fifth, discipline under pressure. For 6 hours, while wounded, on a burning vehicle, under constant fire, Murphy maintained his method. He didn't panic. He didn't waste ammunition. He stayed calm and kept killing with precision. These lessons influenced modern marksmanship training, sniper doctrine, and infantry tactics. Murphy proved that, in some situations, one highly skilled rifleman can have more impact than dozens of average shooters. After the war, Murphy became the most decorated American soldier of World War II with 33 awards and medals. He starred in 44 films, including the movie To Hell and Back, based on his autobiography. He suffered from what we now recognize as PTSD and became an advocate for veterans' mental health. He died in a plane crash in 1971 at age 45, but his legacy endures in the method he demonstrated. When outnumbered and outgunned, precision, discipline, and courage can overcome seemingly impossible odds. Murphy's 6-hour stand killed 23 Germans, but it saved 40 Americans and demonstrated that in war, how you fight matters as much as how many you fight with. That's the lesson of the rifleman who refused to miss.